JD, thank you for jumping on the podcast, man. How you doing
Of
today?
course. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course, man. You've been doing some pretty cool stuff lately, and had to have you on. Had to have you
Ah,
on, hear a little bit
appreciate
about it.
appreciate it. Absolutely.
But look, I'd like to go back a step and just start with, how did you get into sales? How did you find yourself within this world?
By mistake, by accident. Um, I was getting my bar shifts cut down, and I started applying everywhere, and no one took me on. No bites. And then I got this message. It was kind of cryptic message. I showed up. Everybody was in suits, and I don't know what I thought. It was like some Wall Street thing, and then it ended up being door to door. And I went out with the guy. I was like, "Oh, this is horrible," and like, uh, he kind of just took me out, showed me the ropes. And at the end of the day, I was like, I'm not coming back to this." And he was like, "Oh yeah, it was not a bad day. We made like $300." And I'm like, "I'll be back tomorrow," and that was it. And I got my start there and kind of climbed the ranks and started doing really well there. I stayed in door to door for about 2 years, and then started getting into cold calling and kind of just took off from there. But yeah, I didn't even know it was sales. I didn't know what it was all about, but I owe a lot to getting started in door to door.
That's really cool, man. That's where I come from as well, as the door-to-door background. What were you first selling?
I started out with energy contracts, so locking in natural gas and electricity. And then I moved into some telecommunications, eventually did a little bit of alarms and stuff, but pretty much anything, right? We would get whatever contract, and you'd be knocking some doors one day, and then you'd knock those same doors 6 months later with a new program or new offer. So you never knew what was gonna change or when we were gonna go out with something new. But yeah, started with energy contracts and then just kind of went around the world from there.
Yeah. Do you ever have people remember you and like
Oh yeah,
recognize your face?
yeah. I mean, I hit Calgary was mostly my area, and yeah, I mean, over 2.5 years, I probably hit the same neighborhoods, maybe 3 or 4 times over. Yeah.
Yeah, classic. You start going to a door and you're like, I remember this
Uh,
person.
yeah, it throws you because you're like, I don't remember if I was here today or last week or last month. But yeah, it was interesting, and then dealing with the extreme temps as well, like knocking doors and -35, -40 is not a lot of fun. You start thawing out when you get in the house and you're sweating and your nose is dripping. But yeah, definitely, it definitely primes you for everything else. Basically, after door to door, it all seems a lot easier. Yeah.
So you door knock like 12 months a year. You didn't take off the winters.
Oh no, no, all around, all around. Yeah.
Shit. That's hard yakker. That's hard yakker.
Yeah, so I think I calculated something like 60,000 doors I knocked.
Yeah. Just a couple doors.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt.
Okay. So you were doing that for about 2.5 years. When
hmm
you were leaving, what was your position like? Were you running a team? Were you just like gunning it yourself, or what did that look
Yeah,
like?
no, running a team, I was in a position to kind of look at what was next, and they started putting some things aside to potentially build an office for me, and I just kind of had a hard look at like, is this something I want to do long term? I feel like there's more to the sales game. I wanted to get into some B2B stuff, and I decided to kind of jump ship. And I like a little bit of variety. I like to change things up. So yeah, I went into more cold calling from that point, and got into that. And again, the good thing about door knocking is everything seems like a promotion from there. So I got into cold calling and everybody was complaining and felt like it was hard. And I was like, this is a dream, air conditioned office, easy, easy. So I was doing about, $250 a day before we didn't know about dialers, and our lead list was just a yellow pages book. We're just banging out numbers from that.
And what were you selling? What did you first start cold calling for?
Started doing a little bit of advertising. So we do a little bit of in construction and manufacturing, oil and gas. Started doing kind of a two-part process in cold calling. So we cold call businesses, try and get editorial on them, and then get a list of their vendors, sell advertising for that. Did really, really well there, set some records there. But then just kind of kept moving on. I wanted to try more things. I wanted to kind of keep elevating. So then I worked with Xerox for a bit, did really well there, but short-lived. And then went on to oil and gas, and then back into some agency stuff in Toronto. I've had a lot of gigs. I think I've had over 47 jobs in my career.
That's just a couple. That's
Yeah,
just a couple. What,
absolutely.
what what was that side of you that just had you continuing not to? Because a lot of people like they settle into different roles, right? And they'll be
Right.
there 2, 3, 4 years, even careers, right? So like, why did you just feel that innate feeling that I need to continue to move forward?
Yeah, I mean, each time it's different, but I think there's a couple things. I think one, I I love the interview process. Like I used to think like that could be a job for me, is just taking interviews over and over again. I love that process. Um, so I think the variety and also not wanting to settle, and also just feeling stagnant at times. Either I would kind of top out the leaderboard, and I felt like there was no new challenge, or I just felt like the standards or what I was getting out of it wasn't there. It was something different each time, but I always felt like there's more to it. And looking back, I know that, I finally got my kind of dream job. It was padded oil and gas, kind of whining and dining executives, gas card, truck, everything you could want, and a great
Sure.
salary, great commission structure, great bonus structure. And then that was when I realized, like, okay, I've always had something I can blame the jobs on. And then I realized, like, no, it's me. It's me.
Yeah.
Like, I need to do something for myself. I need to have a little bit more flexibility. And so that's when I left corporate and started pursuing kind of the online space. But yeah, I realized at the end it was me. It wasn't the jobs, that I just wasn't built for the corporate lifestyle.
It's funny how you kind of have to go through it first before you can realize that.
Yeah, absolutely. I got everything I wanted and realized, okay, this is not what I wanted. And I really enjoy my freedom and traveling, and yeah, I felt like the online world and a little bit of entrepreneurship was kind of the vibe.
And when was that? Like, when did you start the entrepreneurship side when you're like, man, I need to make this change. I need to have that flexibility and have it more on me.
Yeah, so probably about eight and no more, I would say 9 or 10 years ago, I started looking into it. And started just doing some odd jobs online, just kind of going down that rabbit hole of, make money online. Um, and yeah, I started kind of looking into everything, social media agencies. And what actually kicked it for me is I had a call with, at the time, it was like an e-commerce coach.
Right.
And I got off the call and I was like, I don't really want to do the e-commerce thing. But wait a second, who was the person that I just talked to? Like, who was that? Because they weren't the coach. And then I was like, oh, there's probably a whole industry here of remote sales. Like that was a salesperson. And so that was how I stumbled upon remote sales. It was just kind of like, oh yeah, there's got to be someone selling these high ticket. And then I explored it a little bit more, and got into the e-commerce side. So I actually kind of explored the entrepreneurship side and stumbled back into remote sales. And then about 5 years ago, I started doing some recruiting. I was doing a bit of consulting before that. And then 4.5 years ago, I started Undeniable Closer and UCM.
Okay. And I guess just taking a step back there for a second, when
Yeah,
you were first getting in, right? Like when you had that epiphany, holy crap, there's a whole industry here I haven't even known about.
right.
What did you do then? Like where did you start just researching? Were you reaching out to people? Did you just like reach out to the e-commerce guy? Like how did you get into the space from there?
Yeah, a little bit exactly that. I mean, I reached back out to the e-commerce guy and just asked him like, "Hey, what is this?" And he kind of pointed me in that direction. There wasn't as many trainers and stuff in the space then. That was about 8 years ago. Um, and so I just started to do a little bit of research, looked around, started to kind of go direct to some businesses, and found the worst thing that happened. I found a couple gurus that were in the space, and they kind of laid it all out for me. And I dove in. I was traveling at that time, and I just ate it for like 4.5 months. I made like $3,400 over that 4.5 months. I was bouncing around from offer to offer. I couldn't get anything going. And at that point, I realized that I had been kind of fed some BS and needed to do things differently. I was not doing well financially. I was on the other side of the world, working nights to keep up with the U.S. market and just running myself into the ground. And so that's when I started kind of looking at things differently. I
What
started
were they
looking
feeding you? Like, what were they telling you that was leading you down that path?
just these ideas that you got to start anywhere, you got to work yourself up from the bottom, get your reps in, just DM 500 influencers at a time, send them a generic message, every job's a good job, kind of, it's all about sales, it's all about skill, just the classic stuff that is still being fed today, but just a lot of kind of generic, it's not the offer, it's not this, it's always you. And so I had a pretty good background, so I'm like, oh, I can make this work, and just didn't pay attention to the offers, kind of took everything at face value, and wasn't selective in that process, and kind of went generic, traditional job search strategies that did not work for me, and still don't work for a lot of people. Yeah.
No, that makes sense. That makes sense. It's an interesting thing when someone's getting into it, right? Because
Yes.
it's exactly that. Especially when you have the work ethic of someone from door to door. You're like, yeah, 500 messages, man. I'll bust that
Easy.
out. I'm gonna get exactly what I want. I can
Easy.
do all the volume.
Right. Yeah. And every offer looks like a 10K offer until you get in the door and realize the CEO is making 10K, and that's not going to translate well. Right. So, I needed to make some changes. I realized that either I was being lied to or they didn't know what the heck they were talking about. And either way, I needed to change things up. And so I kind of just backed up, started kind of experimenting and taking some business principles, applying them to remote sales, and turned things around really quickly. I think the next 5 months, I made 120,000. So that was a big change for me. And then that over 12 months, I made about 438,000, which kind of changed my life. That was the most money I'd ever made. And so it was all downhill from there.
What changed? Like, what were some of those business principles you applied into the remote side that you got to see even that first jump from 4,000 in 4 months to 120 in 6? Like, that's pretty huge.
Huge, gigantic. Yeah, there was kind of two main principles. The first one I eventually named it U Inc., but it's basically like I'm operating like a CEO. Sales is my service. I'm marketing myself. I took a little piece from freelance. I realized that, hey, if we look around at other services, Facebook ad specialists, email marketers, copywriters, they all kind of position themselves like a one-person agency. They market themselves. They have discovery calls. They sit down with the business owner. They set the tone. They negotiate the terms. They're free to do what they want to do. They're responsible for producing results. The more I looked around at all the other service providers in this industry, the more I realized there was a lot of autonomy, a lot of freedom, and they were setting up as a service. And then when I looked at our industry, we were employees, and we were told we were going to be contractors. But then I took a step back and looked at the infrastructure and realized that we're sold freedom on the outside, and then when we get in, it's like, whoa, you expected freedom? No, start at the bottom, work your way up, work these hours, buy more training. Like, I realized that a few people have set up the infrastructure in this industry, and they're the ones who benefit from the advice. And so I challenged that, and I decided basically to a little bit, I'm spiteful, a little bit spiteful and a little bit hard-headed. I don't like being told I can't do something. So I took it as a challenge, and instead of just making minor adjustments, I did the opposite of, what I was being told, right? Okay, you told me to start at the bottom and work my way up. I'm going to start at the top. And so the next strategy I developed was like a top-down networking. And it's a
Yeah.
very simple concept, but it's basically the idea that instead of looking at who's hiring, I'm going to look at the best companies and I'm going to knock those doors, because basically my logic, it wasn't like a genius strategy, a bit of stupidity, to be honest, but it worked in that, like, if I go after company number 1 and they reject me, and company 2 and company 3 and company 4, company 5, if they all reject me, but company 6 or 7 or 8 or whatever number it is says yes, what I did was I have the highest opportunity, and I don't care about rejection. So whether that's 6 or 106, I'm still going to get the best opportunity available to me, where a lot of people are just going at who's hiring or who's available or where they think, a lot of people base it on where they think they're ready, and they self-reject. They're afraid, or they see a job ad and it's 2 years experience and they're like, oh, I don't have that. I just put my name in everything, and I got in front of the right people, the people that I thought would have the most money and most revenue coming in. So that was a big one. And then just looking at how can I bypass the traditional job market? How can I get past recruiters? How can I get past job boards? How can I make that direct connection? Because, I have some good relationships with recruiters, but I was looking at that point, like, they're getting paid $5,000 to introduce me. Like, I can introduce myself for free, right? And so I was like, I'm going to treat myself like I'm going to compete with the recruiters instead of waiting in their pipelines. Like, I'm going to be a one-person agency. That's kind of how I treated myself, and those were the game changers for me. Within 2 weeks of implementing that strategy and putting some time into personal branding and networking, I had 6 offers, 8 interviews. I ended up taking one, and then eventually another one, and that's what got me above the 40K a month.
That's such a, like, you put that so simply, right? Because it is, but that's so revolutionary when it comes to the high ticket space, or even when it comes to any business in general, right? Like, when someone thinks typically of, oh, I want a job, they think, okay, I'll go to the people that are hiring jobs.
Right.
But, like, let's be honest, the top companies are always looking for the best people.
Always. Right.
So it
Always.
makes a lot of sense. It's very interesting. It's very interesting. And when you went and you founded, like, do you mind talking about who was that first offer you worked with?
Yeah.
What
So
was
there
that
was a
doing?
couple names that aren't around anymore.
Sure.
But one of the bigger offers, I started with a 9 university. It was like a e-commerce brand. Yeah, I ended up going through some different patches, but early on they were kind of on that incline when e-com was hitting. I
Mm.
did a little bit of stuff on Todd Brown's offer and a few other ones, yeah. But those were the kind of starting, escalating offers.
Okay, so mainly around the e-com space was where you kind of went into, or did it
Well,
vary from there?
that's where I started, but then kind of spread out. Again, I think I've had quite a few offers in the online space. I always had 2 or 3 offers and some consulting gigs as well. I strongly believe in multiple offers in this game. But yeah, always had 2 or 3. But started with e-commerce, then I started to get into some agency stuff. The way I looked at it was I wanted a core offer that basically took up about 60. So I think of my calendar like 100%, right? So if I want to
Okay.
work 40 hours, that's 100%. I think percentages for me is easier. So I wanted my core offer to be about 60 to 70%. And I want that to be high volume, someone who's putting, a couple $100,000 into ads, like high volume, good show up rate, good close rate, like something like 75% and 30%. Something I can get some volume and get some momentum on. I like a shorter sales cycle on that. And once I got solid on that, what I would do is look for the opposite. So something lower volume on calls, but super high ticket. And at that time,
Mm.
we were getting paid 15%. So you sell a 25 or a 40K package, which was what I was selling, like 6K commissions. No brainer, right? Only 1 or 2 of those in a week, and you're laughing. So that was kind of it, is looking for that core offer that I could bank on, and then have that secondary offer. And then if any of them were slipping, kind of just constantly be, replacing and grabbing something better.
Okay. And you're continuing to kind of flick through that. And how long did you do that for? How long were you
About four
doing
and a
that?
half years.
4.5 years. And that
Yeah.
brings you to kind of like 2020? Is that
Yeah.
around that time?
Yeah, exactly. So I did, I was always looking at that kind of, how can I get in there? Like, big fan of Seth Godin book, Linchpin. But the idea of like, how can I get in an organization where when things are rocky, they look and say, well, we can't replace JD. We need 3 people to replace him, right? So whether that's performance or training the guys who are struggling, or leading, the meetings, or just how can I add mass amounts of volume or value, or how can I lock in that loyalty? So I started doing just little things in a campaign and just soaking up what they're doing, and also trying to, make it so that second and third place would equal me in performance. I always wanted to kind of climb that leaderboard. So I started doing some consulting and just like some kind of redeveloping sales processes. I really like the creative side of that, of like, how can we create an experience that no one has had before, and get that competitive edge. And so I started doing that while selling, and then started doing a bit of recruiting with that, where I would go into campaigns, kind of set up a new sales process, and then replace myself once it was established. So it kind of was like a hybrid, consulting and selling at the same time. But yeah, around 2020, I started Undeniable Closer.
Okay. And when Undeniable Closer came to light, like how did that idea come about when you went from like, I know you were doing some of the consulting stuff, so did that just naturally happen, or what was that brain moment that like
Again, it was a little bit of spite. It seems to be the theme. Um, I always remember when I was starting out and seeing the gurus that were kind of advising people, and they basically said, like, if it's not working for you, it's because you're not working hard enough. And at that time, I was putting in 40 hours, 50 hours, night shift. I was working in Korea, starting at 8 p.m., finishing at 7 a.m., 6 a.m. sometimes. And I was just like, screw it. Like, that's crazy, right? How much harder can I work on this, right? And that always kind of stayed with me. And then it started popping up more and more. And we started seeing like Dan Locke and the Sales Mentor and all of these companies kind of pop up. And I was recruiting at the time, and I was just like, I was surprised at how many people were coming in, and they had no idea what this industry was. They had no idea what they were talking about. And they were talking about, oh, I've been trained by the best people and this and that. I'm like, you can't close the door coming into the interview, let alone this interview or a deal, right? And I was just shocked because they seemed like good people, but it's like, as a recruiter, you want to hire people. You don't want to go through hundreds of applicants. And it was like, I can't, like, you're making it so impossible. And so I remember just talking to one kid that I really liked, but he had no idea what he was talking about. And I was just like, can we end the interview? But I want to help you. Like, where did you learn this stuff? And he told me the company, and I started looking into it and realized like they're charging these kids $10K for very generic kind of BS shit.
you want to name drop? You want to name drop who it was?
I kind of already have. But yeah, it's I mean, they're not around anymore, and they definitely paid their they've paid their fees, penalties and stuff. So I think we'll leave it at that. But it was just, really selling people the dream, and kind of delivering bullshit. And so I started kind of getting angry at that and seeing these good kids come in. And so I kind of have a rule that if I start complaining about something and complain about it more than 3 times, I got to do something about it. And so I took actually that kid from the interview and said, like, let's get going. I'll teach you what I know, and kind of these like U Inc. and top-down networking and a couple other strategies on how to get responses from business owners and kind of this hidden job market that I talk about a lot. And he ended up doing 10K pretty quickly. And I was like, all right, well, I'll do this maybe on the side. And so I started, I opened up a case study for 5 people, and like 55 people signed up immediately. And I was like, holy shit, it was bigger than I thought it was ever going to be on day one. And, ended up, I think I started that October 2020 and had like 100 people in before the end of the year. And so it was kind of nuts that there was such a demand for navigating the space. I decided to not do what everybody else was doing and kind of, instead of teaching what I wanted to teach the holes left by some of the gurus and online marketers out there. And so just taught more fundamental business principles, success principles applied to remote sales, how to navigate, how to get a foot in the door, how to make better decisions about your career, and kind of bypass some of the necessary steps that people just think is a rite of passage, like taking bad offers and, just making bad decisions. Basically, it's like everybody thinks that has to be part of the game, and we've all done it. So it's like, why does the next generation have to do it? But salespeople are kind of weird like that, and that we kind of like that people go through the shit we went through. And it's like, we like that new guys suffer, when we could, guide them and help them and make things better for them. I'm not saying easier, right? It's still challenging, but they don't have to step in the same shit that we stepped in, right? And like, we can warn people that there's shit's here and help them navigate around it. And that's kind of what I did. I took the things that mean a lot to me, that I felt like were overused and watered down, like mentorship and mastery and masterminds and all of these things that seem like now just marketing words. And I thought, what happens if you actually care about the people and you don't scale beyond your capacity? And, because I think a lot of these companies that ended up being bullshit, I believe they probably started out with good intention, but it was all profit driven, and it was a house of cards. They built too tall too quickly and put profit first, and they crumbled. And so I thought, what happens if you put people first and get to know each person individually and give them advice specifically for them instead of this kind of universal, generic advice? And so that's what we did.
Where do you think that chip comes from that is inherently on your shoulder?
I feel like people have been telling me my whole life that I've done things wrong, from like holding a pencil to the way I think about things, the way I speak. And, I feel like no one's really kind of given that chance to see that it's just different, right? And I've always kind of thought weird about certain things, but always been able to, use some of that fuel as, it's not so much as an angry as it's kind of passionate that, okay, now I have something to prove. And that was the same thing. And I don't, sales has changed my life, and this industry has changed my life, and it's allowed me freedom to travel and do so many cool things. I don't like people coming in and just, profiting and not delivering what they're talking about. They realize that these are people's lives, and sometimes it can lead in, a lot of horrible things if someone is sold a dream and not delivered. Some people make it through, right? But a lot of people don't. And a lot of people don't recover from that, and they have to go back to the nightmare because, they wasted their money. So, I wanted to do something that I wish I had when I started out, and show kind of the good side of sales and this industry and what it could be.
That's really cool. And when you would go, right, I guess going back to the first strategy, which you said has now kind of, if I'm not mistaken, kind of become like a cornerstone of how you position people to get better offers, is like making that list of who do you want to work for, right? How would you go about outreaching to those people? Like, how does that process even like start? Do I just send a message to the CEO and be like, Jeremy Miner, I want to work for you. How can I make this happen? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple different things, right? So let's say someone like Jeremy, right? Well, first of all, that you're not going to get Jeremy, right? You're going to get one of his DM setters. And a lot of people would kind of avoid that, right? And say like, oh, I'm not going to, why even try, right? And so the first thing I would say is like, prove it, right? Like whenever you start to self-reject, just prove it, right? Like, oh, I'm not ready for that. Prove it. It should be easy to prove, right? Like if you're not ready for something or you are going to get it, like that would be the first thing. It's like, what's so wrong with talking to a DM setter, right? Like that's kind of, if you're going to start with Jeremy, that's probably where you're going to start, right? For the most part, like it's kind of, you also know there's a lot of demand there, right? So the first thing I would look at is, do you actually want to work with that person, right? Or is it the idea of, right? Because you got to look at supply and demand as well, right? Like how many people are lining up to work with Jeremy, right? So when there's a high supply, right, you're going to be like, the demand is not that high, so he can start you anywhere, right? So I would question where you might want to start, but also like take the shot, but don't take the shot looking for a job. What I used to do, and I think this is a big problem for a lot of people, is they're trying to do too much in the DMs. I don't hire in the DMs, right? I'm sure Jeremy doesn't hire in the DMs, right? Like there's a process there, right? I got to get in front of the right people. So what I would look to do is, how can I get a response? How can I get a response? And if not from him, right, like I would also go into LinkedIn and I would start looking at some clues. Right? I would start looking at what might be kind of the, in like FBI movies, there's like the mob boss and then there's the right-hand mans and then there's the layers. Like I would start kind of building that organizational chart and see how high I could get. But I'm always going to shoot my shot, right? I'm always going to shoot at the top and then the side to side. Is there a head of staffing? Is there a COO? Is there, revenue officer? Like, how can I hit those? But what I'm going to do is make it very simple for two things, like simple to respond to and hard to ignore, right? So instead of like, hey, I'm JD, I'm a high ticket club, like most people are like, oh yeah, throw them in the box with 200 others, that messaged me this week, right? So what I want to do is, what does this person want to be acknowledged for? We all have egos, right? So is there something that this person wants to be acknowledged for? Is there something that I can get in? So what I tested early on, and we've been kind of developing different strategies because again, like as something works, it also, the principle will stay alive, but you have to adjust because if you teach someone something, right, they use it and use it and use it. We got a lot of guys, that came in and now they're teaching other people. So it kind of spreads out. So we're always adjusting it. But how I started was very simple. I called it PC plus IQ, right? It was very simple, personalized compliment, irresistible question, right? So if I asked you like, hey, Liam, I love the podcast, man. I've been watching, I catched the first episode was incredible. I've been watching everyone since. I'm curious, are you still looking for guests? Right? Like, might catch it. Right?
Yeah.
Like,
for sure.
It's, you probably want to be seen and you're doing this for a reason. Like it feels good when someone likes the podcast, right?
Of course.
And I'm guessing like there's a constant flow of needing great guests, right? So I would craft it a little bit more than that, but put some more personalization, especially this episode. I really thought there was great questions with this. Right, like take 15 minutes, take 10 minutes if it really matters. If you're someone that I'm really targeting, take that extra 10 minutes, right? And think about what you want to be recognized for and what answer you want to give, right? Like what is easy for you to answer, hard for you to ignore? Because I have people in my inbox, like I wake up with 60 messages and it's like, JD, can you tell me everything I need to know to make 10K? And it's like, geez, man, like, I just met you. I don't know who you are. And like, that's like what part from like day one, that's a lot of information. There's a lot of moving parts. Right. And I can tell that they're just spending that with everybody. Right. And so I started crafting these messages and getting a high response rate. And what I found was everybody's kind of expecting me to then pitch them. Right. And I keep pushing on them and keep pushing on them and keep making it about them, to the point where like I knew it was a perfect timing when like the magical words is like, JD, what is it that you do? And once I get that, now I know that they're curious, right? Curiosity is it's a great attractive quality, right? So when someone is curious about me, I know now I would take it a step further and almost like push it back. Like, oh, I help podcasts, or I help coaches, or I help this increase revenue and da, right? But anyways, I'm really curious, and I would keep pushing it back on them, and it would kind of drive them nuts. Like, why is this guy not pitching me? But then it would be easy to get the call, right? And just because I got the call doesn't mean that I would get the offer. Like, one of the biggest campaigns I ever worked on, they turned me down at first, right? They're like, oh, we just hired 15 guys, right? And it was just staying in that pocket and figuring out how I can extend the conversation. I said, I totally understand it. And if that makes the most sense, that's what we'll do. But I am curious, like, of those 15 guys, do you think everybody's going to perform? And do you think everybody's going to be around in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks? And the reason I ask is I've noticed that turnover in this industry is quite high, right? So what I'd be willing to do, I believe this is the place I want to be. So what I'd be willing to do is learn the process, stay on deck, and don't worry about me. Fill your guys up like they're your priority. If someone's sick, if someone's out, if someone gets fired, if someone's not performing, if someone calls in last minute, shoot me a message. In 10 minutes, 15 minutes, if I'm around, I'll jump on a call. At any time, I'll learn your process. If you need to replace anybody, I'm here, whatever you need. Right? There's nothing to lose there. Right? And I can still go look for other opportunities. I can still work, but it was making it easy for them to say yes to, right? And I got in, and of course, within like a week, someone dropped out or someone was off, and like I'm taking calls within a week, opening up on weekends and the time that no one else wants to work. And so it was like, as soon as I got in, I was basically on board and ready to go. But I just make it very hard for them to say no, and very easy to say yes. And that's the same principle with the outreach is, I make it hard to ignore and easy to answer. And then we move the conversation along. I think too many people are doing too much in those calls or not enough.
Hey, what's an example of someone doing too much?
Too much is the life story or the big pitch. Hey, I'm JD. I'm a high-tech closer. I got 18 years experience. I do this. I do that. I've closed for this person. I've done all of these things. Right? There's no curiosity. There's no build-up. Right? If you have a really, really, really strong resume and you can lead with that, maybe. Right? But if you're new, like, why are you giving them those details? Right? Like, there's nothing impressive. I had people that message me and like, God bless, you're doing great. But you message me like, I got $30,000 in revenue generated. Well, that's not like a holy shit, like drop everything, Like you're probably a great person, but that's not like a leading thing that excites me, right? And so it's like you got to know that if you're leading with numbers and leading with your resume and that's not your strongest point, don't lead with it, right? Like lead with the things that make the most sense, which is talking about them, getting them interested, because basic principle is, to be interesting, you have to be interested, right? And so make it about them, right? That's the thing that they want to talk about. That's the thing they're excited about, right? And get them curious as to what you can do for them.
Who's been your favorite success case? Now, I'm not talking, I have to drop names, but like, who's someone that you worked with implementing this strategy and kind of how did they take it besides yourself?
Yeah. I mean, there's so many, and they would be like, I love the guys that have come in and just crushed it financially. I love the guys that put the numbers in, like a Chance Rahill and Alvaro, that came in and just crushed it early on. But what I like about that is a lot of those guys like broke the mold in what had to happen. Like a big thing now is people say, oh, you got to be a setter for a certain amount of time. And that is good advice for some people. But you and I both know that some people just have it, right? Like there's some people that have it, and it's very just lazy advice for us. Like you can't, like you're going to be right enough that you can get away with it. But there's some people that if you just take the time and you say, I think you got it. Like Alvaro was an opera singer, right? Like he had no background at all, but he was very adamant. Like, I want to be a closer. And so instead of just saying no, what I said was, you're going to face more rejection. It's going to be tougher for you, right? But like, it is possible. Most people just don't want to face the rejection long enough to do it. But, he came in and made $400K in his first 2 years, right? Like, it's there for certain people. It's not there for everybody, and it's not the right move. But those are always great. But I think for me, because of how serious I take the mentorship, it's the people with like the trauma, they've been given up on, they were told they're not good enough, they're not cut out for it, like they've been just kind of shit on and left for it, and like they're never going to be they may never be like the 40K a month, but like to change their kid's life and change the direction and work through, like I do a lot of the emotional side. I am there as kind of a support, especially in the beginning. Like you could call me at 3 a.m. and I'd be there. I don't sleep that much. So, I'm notorious for answering messages pretty late, but those ones to me mean the most. They're my favorite case studies. It's like, this person came from a horrible situation, went through horrible things, and is now dealing with their emotion, making better decisions, and able to support their family. Like those ones will always mean more to me than just who made the most money. And then I think the other one that I'm proud to see now is most of our alumni are also on the wealth creation side. A lot of them are starting businesses and kind of using that service provider, Ewing side that we talked about. Some of them are, inside remote sales. Some of them are outside, but they're thinking ahead, and life after sales is a big thing we talk about. Most people have an expiry. Some people it's very short, and this is a stepping stone. Some people it's a longer journey, but I think everybody should be thinking not only how do I rise in sales, but how do I rise outside of sales? How can I go from earnings to profit to returns? I think that we need to talk about that. It's kind of like, NFL players or athletes, they think that they're going to be making this much money, or an artist has a hit song and they think it's just going to be all roses. I think we have to start teaching them the financial education and the wealth creation on the back end, so that, they don't lose it all and have worked for nothing. So.
No, I get that, man. It's something like I said, I came from door to door as well, right? And I don't know about you, but that was one of the big things. It was always the cornerstone of what I was taught was, okay, yeah, how are you using the money? What are you doing? What are you rewarding yourself with? And you talked about the aspects outside of just the door knocking, because let's be honest, it's not that fun. There's not a whole lot that can go into that. So they would talk about all the other stuff, all like, okay, what is that money doing for you? How are you using that money? How's it influencing your life? How are you leveling up? Where are you going next? Right? That was always the conversations I was having when I was hiring people. But you look in the high ticket spot and it's like, yeah, bro, I'm making 5K this month. I'm like, okay, what's that 5K going to do? I'm making 10K this month. Okay, why?
Right.
Like for your bank account to go up? Like,
Right.
Yeah, I just see it's very much missed in terms of there. And maybe that's one of the reasons we have high churn rate. I don't know. What do you feel like is that?
Yeah, I think there's a part of that. I think it's just, it's so hard because on the outside, people are selling them the dream, right? They got the picture of the beach with the laptop, that ridiculous picture. Like, yeah, I don't know if you've ever tried to work from the beach with your laptop. It's not as fun as it seems. The glare, you can't see anything.
The wind is the worst.
Yeah. And so we're selling them the dream. And then when they get in, we're like, where's this entitlement come from? It comes from the market. Like you just sold them financial freedom, time freedom, location freedom, work when you want, the fake calculations of, here's how you make 10K, just like they do in MLMs. Like the calculations make sense, then this must be it, right? So it's so strange that we sell them the bullshit on the outside, and then we're like, where'd you get that from? When they get inside, and we kind of treat them like, no, of course you're not a closer. Well, why did you sell me closer training? If I have to start as a setter, why did you start me with $10,000 closer training? Why wouldn't you start me with the setter training? So it's like, again, the infrastructure kind of sets people off on the wrong foot. And then when we get in, we kind of bully them around of like, what do you think you're entitled? All of this stuff. And it's like, that was the path that led them in. And some people adjust, but some people don't, right? And so I think, we need more transparency in the industry. And, I'm talking to more business owners about, let's just lay out, instead of random OTEs and overselling people, let's be transparent with the numbers. There's a lot of people that will be happy with 6 to 8K right now, right? But if you tell someone it's 15K and they come in 6 to 8, like 6 to 8 for a lot of people is game changing, right?
Yeah.
But when you say 15, you feel catfish, right? And so no matter what, you're going to feel like you got misled. And so I think we need more transparency on both sides. We need to be able to see through and just say, this is what it is. Hey, I know everybody wants an A+ rep, but you're a C+ company. That's not a bad thing, right? But this is where you're at. And hey, I know you want to make 15K, but right now you're a 6 to 8K rep, right? And that's okay. You're not going to be that forever, and you're not going to be that forever. Both can grow, but this is the place to grow, right? And we have to start matching and stop thinking like, it's kind of like when people have kids, everybody thinks their kid is the cutest, but it's, it's bias, right? And so we just have to have better third parties. Recruiters are sometimes just telling businesses whatever they want to hear and kind of overselling. I think we need to just like pull back the curtain a little bit and just call it what it is and have that transparency. I think that's a big part. And I think also looking at more metrics than just the experience level. I don't think experience is a great metric because, I've seen guys that have been in the industry for 5-6 years and they're not great.
Sure.
And I've seen people that come in 2-3 months and they're crushing it. Like experience is mostly time, where this is a performance-based industry. It's more about capabilities. So I think we need to change the metrics. This like 2-year, 1 million, I think that's a very limited way to look at recruiting and hiring. I think it's kind of a lazy way to do it. No disrespect to the people that do it. I understand that you got to go through a lot and it's time consuming, but I think we need more matchmaking. I think there's certain characteristics, there's certain personalities, there's certain offers where a 19 or 20-year-old kid will come in and crush it. There's certain offers that people won't want to talk to that person. We got to kind of match these different things. We got to look at the maturity of some people rather than the experience, so the life experiences. There's a lot of different factors. And I think we got to do a better job of guiding people not only to the strong offer, but the right offer for them to get to the next level. And we also just have to look at, where can we provide these stepping stones? And some companies would be better off having a little bit more of a revolving door and saying, this is a great place to develop, right? You're not going to be here forever, but here's a great place to develop, right? And some people will end up staying there, right? I think we need to, there needs to be a lot of disruption in this industry. And I think this year is the year that it's going to happen. We're already starting to see that. So I'm excited for it.
No, it definitely is the year of disruption. I think 2025 is going to bring quite a few changes to the industry, which will be good. I'm excited to see it.
Yeah. It needs it, right? Like a lot of people it's dying and this is happening, but that's just
you're young to die, mate.
It's an adjusting market, right? It's sales done remotely. It's not going anywhere. The coaching industry, when you look at the stats behind it, is going up, right? Like the infrastructure is outdated. The training is outdated. Calling something mastery and teaching competency is outdated. Charging $10,000 for a script or an updated version of spin selling is outdated. Like there's a lot of things that have to happen, and we have to kind of break down some of the infrastructure in this industry. And I think a lot more transparency and a lot more support on both sides. And I think we got a home run. And I think you're going to see a lot of different changes this year that are going to be good for the people that are prepared and agile to take advantage of it.
Yeah, no, I agree. And what I'd like to focus on for a second is just on sales, right? When you are in a sales call, when you're talking to someone, what is your workflow? What is your workflow? What are you going through? What do you find as your priority? What isn't the priority? I know it's a very generalized question, but I'm just curious from you.
Yeah, I get. I think, it's very different now because I'm selling my own offer. So I get on the call, and I also know that, hey, I could sell this person, but I also got to fulfill for them, and I may not want them on the other side, right? So I got to deal with them on the other side. So I'm more selective now. Um, but for me, it's, I don't know if you're a boxing fan, but I'm a big boxing fan, and there's a guy named Lomachenko, and for the first 2 or 3 rounds, it almost seems like he's losing. It seems like he's going to lose every fight. But what you realize he's doing is kind of downloading. Like he's figuring out the distance, figuring out the tendencies. He's kind of figuring out who's in front of him so that he can win the later rounds. And I think that's more my style is I'm willing to sacrifice the first few questions. Like you hear a lot of reps that are like, oh, they talk too much or they didn't talk enough. Like, I don't care where they take it. What I'm trying to figure out is the different indicators of what situational selling I need to adjust to. So my sales strategy is much more situational. I'm looking at the awareness level. I'm looking at the sophistication level, but I'm also looking at personality. I'm looking at, I'm trying to get a baseline temperature so that I can kind of see where things go from there. So I like starting with intention rather than situation, really just kind of seeing like, I want the first few questions to be a blank slate where there's no like, when you ask someone their goal, it kind of leads them. When you ask them their challenge, it leads them. I like to start with intention because that can mean anything. So if someone starts telling me about the future instantly, I know that that's what's on their mind and that's what leads them to this call and this decision. If they start going back and telling me their whole life story, that tells me a lot. If they start telling me very like matter of fact, or if they're very resistant, very timid, all of those things tell me something and it tells me how I have to adjust. So I have a very natural selling style. I don't have a lot of structure or intention. I kind of base it off what the person, and I kind of have a list of things that I need to hit that I know kind of accumulate to a sale. But I'm really playing off the person and I want authentic and I want to make a connection. I want to have depth. I want to support them and be authentic and genuine, but also have that conversational leadership and a lot more focus on influence than persuasion. I'm not a big believer of, overuse of persuasion.
How much of that do you think comes from your door-to-door time? Because I feel like that, at least from what I've seen in very good door-to-door sellers, like they are very situational. They know how to adapt to the type of person they're talking to.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the agility comes from door to door, right? Like being able, and really the cold calling too. Like for me, that those first 4 years were pivotal. Being able to adjust and be quick on your feet, I think it adjusted there. But I think the empathy and the desire to connect on a deeper level and have a very natural conversation came later on. Going through some things in my own life and kind of hitting some downtime. I think that really developed this kind of, I want to connect on a deeper level and start learning about human psychology and behavior and started to learn about myself and my own fears and my own limiting beliefs. So I think it was the balance of both. Like, definitely the door to door and the cold calling gave me that agility and adaptability. And then later on, learning about myself and learning about what causes me to make bad decisions, because my selling style really, or kind of the principle is like, I'm here to facilitate the best decision possible, right? And if that's a no, it's my job to get them to no as close to 100% as possible, right? If it's yes, my job is to get them to yes. And I think that kind of neutrality allows me to hear things that a lot of salespeople won't hear, because I'm not trying to sell them. I'm not trying to convince them. I'm not trying to persuade them. So there's nothing to really object to, because if you come on the call, right, if I represent the sale, everything that doesn't is in conflict. It's an objection, right? It's an opposition. But if my true intention is to help you make the best decision, what can you object to? You want to make the worst decision, or, like, it's all about finding that alignment. And so I think that that's kind of the two blends. I owe a lot definitely to the door to door and the cold calling, but I also think that learning about myself and how my emotions work and human psychology and human behavior and just what makes people sabotage and limiting beliefs, I think that really has kind of elevated, my sales process usually.
I've just started to go through, well, not just, but like in the last 6 months, I've been going down more the psychology route. Um, and Chase Hughes, the 6 minute X-ray.
Yeah.
I had just finished going through it for the second time this week, and I was watching the Beast Games. I'm not sure if you've seen the Beast Games on Amazon Prime.
Yeah.
And it was so interesting just being able to dissect the different types of people and how they get their pleasures, right? Like, how do they want to be valued and seen? What are their motivating factors? I thought it was fascinating.
It's so interesting, right? And starting with yourself and just, it's very therapeutic too, to just start with yourself, because if you can, it's two things. One, you don't want to be a hypocrite, right? So like anybody that's watching, that's starting out, like one of the easiest things to advise you to do is operate like the business owner you want to attract and operate like the prospect you want to speak to every day. We want proactive, we want courageous, we want, people that are aware, we want people, to make the right decisions, to show up, to be eager, all of these things towards their pursuits. So it's like, do the checklist in your life, and are you doing those things? Now, sales trainers will tell you, like, if you're not investing in yourself, then you can't ask a prospect. It's a great way to sell more sales training. But you can also look at it broader. Like if you're not investing the time, it doesn't have to be money, your time, your focus, your energy, right, in the areas that you want to pursue, then it's very hard, right? But if you're asking someone to make an optimal decision in spite of fear, you better be doing that as well, right? So it's like starting with yourself and looking at what has held you back. We all have a weapon of self-sabotage. Some of my perfectionist or my procrastinators or my negative self-talks, like, look at what has been the pattern that gets you in trouble, right? And start just working on that and look at how to influence that, how to change that. And you're going to notice that a lot of prospects have that. Now start with the people you know more about, right? Like start with the family or the friends or the people close to you or your partner, and start kind of looking at how they seek significance or connection, or what are their sabotage, and kind of expand from there, because you have a lot more data. But just exploring that, and you can't unsee it, right? Once you start learning about it, you'll see it. Like you'll see, oh, that's a significance, that's a variety. Oh, this person's doing this. That's a perfectionist because they're afraid to fail. Like you just start seeing it everywhere, and you pick up on the smallest things that most salespeople miss because they're thinking about what to say next.
And how do you feel like that affects your sales game and your sales process nowadays? Now having that knowledge,
it's everything. I think not only did it change the game performance wise, right? Like it elevated me to a different level performance wise, but more importantly, like it made sales interesting. Like instead of just focusing on like, oh, sales a good call, non-sales a bad call, like every call was interesting. I enjoyed, like, I'd hit a wall in sales and felt like maybe this isn't for me. And what I realized was selling the way that most people are training isn't for me. But the more I started being interested in these things and how can I connect with this person and what is the kind of puzzle that needs to be unlocked here, it made everything fascinating. And it just gave me a new lease on sales that, hey, there is so much depth to this, and it's never ending, and it's enjoyable. And I enjoy having these conversations no matter the outcome. And when you do that, the outcome is also really fucking good. So it's kind of, I was willing to sacrifice performance to have more genuine conversations. And because I was willing, I think the performance went up anyway, because people can tell that I genuinely care and they're genuinely getting a response. I don't need a tonality that tells me I'm curious. Like I'm fucking curious, and I don't need a tonality of confused. Like if I'm confused by something, I sound confused. If I'm enthusiastic about something, I sound enthusiastic. I think this idea that we have to learn fake words and then learn how to make them sound real, I think we should find real words and then add in the sales training and some of the tactics after, but start with the genuine conversation, because we all have the capability. Like everybody, you don't have to be in sales to know that you've helped someone make a decision. Your friend comes to you or someone comes to you, right? And you can sit them down at a coffee shop and talk them through certain things, and you can help them make that decision. That's what we do, right? And that's what prospects want. And so it's like, I'm hating the way I'm selling. The prospects hating the way I'm selling. Like, why are we doing this? Right. And it's just because, it just got a little lazy. Other industries have evolved much rapidly. You look at marketing over the last 20 years compared to sales, we haven't been evolving because we've let a few people say that this is mastery. And I look at what's out there now, and it's basic level competency. It's like saying you can win the Tour de France with training wheels on, right? Like, learning a script and tonality is the base level of sales. It's not mastery. It's not the top 1%. That's how they market it. But how is, like, learning a script? Memorization is not mastery, right? So we got to challenge ourselves to evolve this and challenge what's being taught as a baseline rather than a destination.
And I think on that, right, you have just started something, well, maybe it wasn't recent, but you've been posting about it recently, where it is the real life role plays. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Not being a fake prospect, not being some make-believe person that doesn't actually exist, that you're just coming up with answers on the spot. Can you walk me through, like, what was the thinking behind that and how did that come about?
Yeah. I realized that, like, I'm sure we've all been on so many role plays where you're like, the prospect wouldn't say that, right? Like, they wouldn't say that, or they wouldn't say it that way, right? Like, what I like to do is pick up on that temperature, right? Like, I like to notice the emotional shifts. Like, for me, I kind of feel certain things. And when the prospect is challenging me in a way, when I know it's like a person just trying to see what I would say, like, I wouldn't respond to that, right? I would kind of stop the conversation and pull back. So there's all these times where I'm like, the prospect wouldn't say that, or they wouldn't say it like that, or I'm not feeling the emotion behind it. So it's very hard for me to pick up, right? And so what I realized was this part of this is just true discovery. Like, adding in the scripting and the sales process on the back end is pretty easy to do, but starting with a natural conversation, I'm talking to Lean, right? Like, what's going on? And when I pick up on that and I pretend like I have whatever product you need, but I can really go through that natural discovery, right? What's going on? Can I get your motivation? Can I get your desire? Can I get what you think is possible? Where are your limiting beliefs on that, right? Like, how urgent is this for you? How committed? What does it actually mean for you beyond just the result? When I can get those things, right, those levers, then everything else falls in place. But if I can't get those, then I'm just given a generic script, right? And that's a big problem that I have. I find it very disrespectful to. We've heard these same questions over and over again. We lose the sensitivity, like, especially with consequence questions. Like, it's a very weird thing to ask. Like, well, what happens if you're still a loser in 6 months, right? Like, what happens if all your dreams fail, right? Like, what happens if this doesn't happen? We're told that that's the key to selling, but if we're going to just do that and then slap a generic pitch on the end, I think it's pretty disrespectful that, like, you're leveraging someone else's pain and fear, and you're not authentic. And oftentimes for the right person, it comes off like, who are you? Like, that's not going to happen, right? And I think it causes a lot more pain than good. So being able to have those natural connections where I now know what it means to you and I can adjust from the discovery to sell you what you're looking for, right? To use your logic, to use your reasoning, to find out what is optimal in your eyes and what is your criteria, and use that instead of what I think you should buy or what I think you should do. And I think we have to add in more. Prospects are tired of it. We're tired of it. I don't think a lot of people like the way they sell, but they're just so comfortable with it. And they're so reliant on it, and it gives them a false sense of certainty that they're not challenging it. They're afraid to go outside of the box. And I think we have to create more environment where they can experiment and play around. It's amazing how many people are uncomfortable. Like, I have people that are well-trained, like $30,000 in training. They come in and they can't do a natural discovery. they can't do it with like the voice gets fake, and they lean on questions. They can't just have a natural conversation. That tells me so much. Like, at the cornerstone of what we do is communication, and there's a lot of people who can sell but they can't communicate. And you take away their crutches. You say, don't ask about this and don't ask about that, and they don't know what to do. And I think that's a real shame in this industry, because there's so much depth to what we do, and it can go so much higher. And to have people that know how to follow a script but don't know how to connect and communicate, I think really reflects on, leadership in our space.
How do you practice that? So if someone's listening to this and they're like, okay, I fully agree, JD, I don't know how to have a regular conversation. Please, I don't know how to do a natural discovery. How can they go about practicing that to get better at that?
That's the beautiful thing, is start just discovering, start exploring, have a conversation with your friend, with another person in the space, have a networking call. Like, people used to crap on networking calls all the time, like, oh, it's all about skill. But guess what? You're developing skill in these networking calls. Like, what I teach people is lead the discovery on the networking call, right? Like, connect with someone, find out what they're working on, find out why they're in remote sales, what they're all about, right? Like, find out what they're afraid of. Like, find out how much depth you can get to the conversation, see what you can do for them, what they need, what they're looking for, who would they like to connect with, who their dream offer is, why, right? Like, get genuinely curious about, you can have these conversations. Like, a natural discovery is just being interested in another person, right? But with conversational leadership, see how you can lead the conversation, see what direction, see where you get the resistance and where people get excited and how excited you can get them. And then, just how you can push certain buttons, like open it really up, and without desired outcome, without, a destination, a predetermined destination. That's the big problem with a lot of salesperson, and they have already decided that yes is the answer, and now they're on this side. And human nature is, when someone is too far pro, then you have to balance with too far con, right? That's pros and cons, is a natural development of decision making. So when you predetermine far on this side, the prospect has to do on this side. So go in neutral and just be curious about, humans are interesting, right? Like, connect with other humans, have conversations, make someone feel connected and understood, and see where you can lead that conversation. See how deep you can get those conversations. And also, if not, come to remote sales school, because we're doing natural discoveries every week, right? On every call, we're experimenting and we're playing around with different ideas, and not predetermining how a sales call should go or what questions. We're pulling away the crutches of most salespeople and see what happens, and allowing them to fail, and then talking about it. What did we feel from that person, and what's really the driver, and what does it mean to, what does it feel like for a parent or a father to be a provider and not feel like a good provider? Like, what does that actually, like, it fucking stinks, like, let's get there, right? Because it's not about the money, it's about the responsibility, but also the security. Like, let's really break it down at a different level, right? And just get some depth back to what we do.
I love that. Look, JD, you've dropped some really good knowledge bombs in here, and it's been real. I really appreciate you coming on. If someone's resonated with you today and they want to be able to connect with you, who do you best serve, and where can they find you?
Yeah, I mean, obviously right now it's mostly in the remote high ticket sales space. So I have Undeniable Closer on the Facebook group. That's probably our main destination. We just launched a remote sales school, which is bringing back the true pursuit of mastery, bringing back, respect to the craft of communication and influence and decision making, and some of those core elements of what I feel are important to the craft. So, remote sales school on School Community. You can just reach out to me on Messenger. Like I said, I am the one in my DMs. I don't have a DM setter. When you get an email from me, it's my emails. But yeah, just look me up there. Our YouTube channel, JD Daley. Connect with me anywhere you can find me on there, and let's just have a chat. I'm always jumping on calls with people. You'll find that you're not going to get a big pitch from me. I won't try and convince you of anything. It's you either get it or you don't, and respect you either way. Right. So let's chat, hit me up, whatever, easy.
Thank you, JD. Well,
Chris,
guys, if you like this episode, make sure you like, comment, and let me know who you want to see on next.